The Tennis Gambling Podcast and the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. You can win up to 325 times your entry with their new Pick 8. Sign up with the promo code SGPN. Claim your special pick and the first-time deposit offer up to $50 in bonus cash. Nordic Fantasy, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get the best data-driven props and picks from Rhythm. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamepodcast.com/rhythm, sportsgamepodcast.com/RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Thursday afternoon on June 6th, roughly 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun but short episode because we are approaching the final stages of the French Open, as it is officially time to get into the semifinals on the men's side. And we're going to cover both matches taking place on Friday. Now, if you forgot what the matchups are, you have two good ones. You have Alcaraz taking on Sinner as the early match, and you have Ruud against Zverev as the later match. So those are the two matchups. Should be fun, and we are going to have, no matter what happens, a new first-time French Open winner. So keep that in mind. If Zverev or Ruud win, then we have a first-time Grand Slam winner. So some history to be made, and either way, it should be fun as the matchups look quite solid on paper. Either way, though, before we get into any of the actual preview of those matches, do want to recap what happened in the last episode for the women's semifinals, that's matchups that took place on Thursday. For the lock, ended up winning. We had Goff team total under 7.5 at -125. Mentioned there were a bunch of different lines available. You had 7.5, 7, or even 6.5. Didn't matter what line you took. Ended up getting there as Goff only won 6. Swiatek is just too good on clay. Simply put, Goff never really stood a chance. Was up a break early in the second set and then immediately gave it back and then got broken again. But Goff is just not capable of actually competing with Swiatek on a regular basis. The head-to-head now is 11-1, and I believe all 11 wins were in straight sets. So point is, even though Goff is now the new number 2 player in the world, according to the rankings, congratulations, there's a massive gap between her and Iga, and she's got to figure it out. So point is, Goff got destroyed. Not a surprise, as Swiatek has beaten everybody handily besides Osaka in this event. I'll go into a bit more detail with that for the women's final episode that we will be airing tomorrow. Point is, though, Goff under for the team total got there. Pretty much every angle we liked for the match got there. Swiatek team total under 12.5 got there. Straight sets got there. The total, I think, ended up getting there too. It was at 19. That landed 18. So if you bet on Swiatek by destruction, you won. So not a shock there. She's actually a minus, I think it's 1650 favorite in the final. So that tells you that Iga is once again projected to just destroy the competition again, especially in the final, to win her, to win another Grand Slam title and to win another French Open title. Now, as for the other semifinal matchup, unfortunately did not go our way, as we did go with the over 2.5 sets in the Andreeva and Paolini match. Was torn between Paolini moneyline and the over 2.5 sets, and I chose poorly. I thought the odds were insane for the actual money line for Andreeva, and that turned out to be correct, but I thought that Andreeva would put up more of a fight. She didn't, and you ended up seeing Paolini bury her. So that's the matchup you got now. You got Paolini taking on Swiatek. We'll dive into it a bit more in the next episode. Might be a short episode, because once again, she's like minus 1,500 to win the event. So I can't really dive much into it, but we're going to try to figure something out. We'll go with that approach, but either way, though, point is for the men's episodes, we're going to stick with mostly recapping the quarterfinal matchups, and then we'll get into the semis. So before we get into any of the actual quarterfinal match recaps, do want to remind you once again that we are on both YouTube, YouTube and or Spotify and Apple. So if you do want to support the show, you can like, subscribe on YouTube. Have seen the subscribers bounce up a little bit recently, so thank you for joining, and hopefully you stick with us for a long, long time. Either way, though, if you are still listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, that's okay. I don't hate you. But don't forget to leave a rating and a review if you do like the show. And a reminder that you also have some merch on the SGPN merch store for the Tennis Gambling Podcast. We do have, for example, mugs, we have sweatshirts, we have regular t-shirts, a lot of different colors, a lot of different overall options to choose from. And I definitely recommend you getting something to support the show. I have a couple of shirts, so I'll definitely wear those just to show you what it looks like on the show, probably in the next week or so. Either way, though, point is, do want to remind everybody once again, though, that we have other shows with the network, including the NBA Gambling Podcast show that I'm actually on. And there are a couple of promos going on because the NBA Finals actually start today and the Stanley Cup Finals start over the weekend. We have a couple of free contests to enter with a cash grand prize. So you're looking at the NBA Finals, and we are giving away $100 cash and a $100 gift card to the listener who wins our NBA Finals prop contest. Head over to sportscampodcast.com/NBA Finals to enter. And they also have a hockey gambling podcast contest because those guys are running a Stanley Cup contest with a $100 cash and a $100 gift card prize. So go to sportscampodcast.com/Stanley Cup to enter. Anyway, time to get into the actual recap of the quarterfinal matchups for the men's. To get into that, do want to recap the matches. A reminder that these took place over the course of 2 days. You had 2 quarterfinal matchups on Tuesday and 2 on Wednesday. The 2 on Tuesday kind of sucked. Sinner beat Dimitrov in straight sets. Not really a shock that Sinner won. Dimitrov, though, was awful for about 2 straight sets, had 0 break points. I think he had a break point early in the third, could not convert, and then ended up breaking the only time in the match for him when Sinner was serving it out at 5-4. So Dimitrov was awful, and Sinner smacked him as he won in straight sets. And then Alcaraz beat Tsitsipas again. What a shock. He owned Tsitsipas, and Tsitsipas had some quotes after the match, and he basically just said Alcaraz is the only one who makes me feel this way, in the sense of just pure hopelessness. And that's kind of what Alcaraz has done to Tsitsipas over the years. He's 6-0 lifetime. And Tsitsipas can't beat this guy at the end of the day. Tsitsipas, I thought, kind of picked it up late. I thought the serve and volley tactic was actually working. And that was kind of the main adjustment he made in the middle of the match. Did find it kind of funny that Tsitsipas did get a warning for mid-match coaching, which I thought was kind of amusing because we know the history behind that with Tsitsipas getting advice from his father illegally or legally over the course of matches over the years. Point is, though, Tsitsipas ran out of answers, and Alcaraz had all the answers as Alcaraz won in straight sets. So I thought Tsitsipas would be able to make at least it a bit more interesting. I guess going to a breaker counts, but I thought he might win a set. Same with Dimitrov, but at no point did I think that Sinner or Alcaraz were going to lose. I thought that we were going to see the collision course, and now we have it, as we have Sinner versus Alcaraz in the semifinal. Now, as for the other matches that took place on Wednesday, he only had one of them because, a reminder, Djokovic did withdraw. That was actually our lock for the episode. We ended up having Rude Moneyline at -118, hoping Djokovic would show up, and if he did, look very, very compromised, and Djokovic decided it wasn't worth it. He's got Wimbledon coming up. I believe he does need a procedure on the knee, so we'll see how quickly the recovery time is. Maybe he'll have to miss Wimbledon. We'll see what happens, but Djokovic decided it wasn't worth his time, so he ended up retiring, and you ended up seeing Rude get the walkover into the semifinal. So the other match, though, was also competitive, but straight sets, as Zverev ended up beating de Minaur in straight sets. Was a pretty annoying match if you ended up having de Minaur to win a set in parlays or anything, because de Minaur had chances. He had a set point in the second set. It was on Zverev's serve, but the point is it was still a set point. He also led 4-0 in that second set breaker, and then kind of fell apart. The real story of the match, or at least the main turning point, was the 5-5 tiebreaker point, where it ended up taking 39 shots. De Minaur ended up having a drop shot, which looked really good. Zverev somehow got there, and then de Minaur, instead of hitting a cross court, hit it right at Zverev. Zverev hit the volley, ended up winning the point, and then ended up winning the set with the next point. So it would have been a set point for either player, regardless of who won, because it was 5-5. So obviously, if de Minaur had won that point, maybe he steals a set. Didn't happen, though, as Zverev was a bit too rock solid in the big points of the match, and de Minaur just could not hit the ball through him, simply put. So you had 3 matches that were completed in the quarters, and none of them went to 4 or 5 sets. So that kind of sucks. Hopefully that changes in the actual semifinal matchups because we are looking for a bit of drama. Now, before we get into any of the actual semifinal matchups, do want to take this time to remind everybody that we're brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, because the NBA Finals are coming up, obviously, starting tonight, and Underdog Fantasy has a new Pick 8. Create entries of up to 8 picks, and Underdog will automatically double flex entries, so you can miss up to 2 picks and still win your entry. With more picks to make and more ways to win, the excitement is higher than ever. The best part, you're going up to 325 times the original amount. You can now use specials and boosts for all flexed entries, and if you also want to potentially use an angle that I gave out on the NBA show, I don't mind the Josh Green higher half a 3-pointer in game 1 tonight. He's made at least 1-3 in 12 of the last 13 games. I find that kind of appealing as an angle. Don't forget to, once again, use this opportunity before it is gone. And a reminder that if you end up using the promo code SGPN when you sign up, you will claim a special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash at Underdog Fantasy. Promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping the men's quarterfinal matchups that took place on Tuesday and Wednesday. Now it's time to get into the matchups for Friday. So starting off with the first match, you have Alcaraz versus Sinner. I understand that it's in Europe, and I understand that they wanted the matchup in the middle of the day, I guess, but I feel like this should be the late match. I feel like you should be putting the best match late, and they just didn't do it. So they got Sinner versus Alcaraz early, so now I got to wake up at 8:30 in the morning. I know, it sucks to be me, I guess. But either way, point is Alcaraz is a minus 162 favorite. Sinner is around plus 142. As for the game spread, Alcaraz minus 2.5, Sinner plus 2.5. The over-under for games is somewhere between 37.5 and 39.5. You kind of shop around and find different numbers. Alcaraz to win in straight sets is plus 285. Sinner to win in straight sets is 6-1. Alcaraz to win in 3 or 4, so the minus 1.5 set handicap is plus 120. Sinner plus 1.5 games is minus 150. The over 3.5 sets is minus 220. The under 3.5 sets is plus 180. And the over for 4.5 sets is plus 190. Now, the head-to-head we know is very close between the two of them, and we know that this matchup should, on paper, be must-watch TV and should be an absolute war. Now, the head-to-head is technically in favor of Alcaraz. Alcaraz is up 5-4. Alcaraz has struggled a bit recently, though. He has lost 2 of the last 3 meetings, including lost in the only clay head-to-head meeting back in Umag back in 2022. I believe that was for the final, and Sinner actually won the last 2 sets 6-1, 6-1. Was dated, though. I don't know if that actually matters. We saw Alcaraz beat Sinner in the only meeting this year, as he beat Sinner in Indian Wells before eventually winning the title in 3 sets. They faced off in Beijing last year. Sinner won in straight sets. Faced off in Miami. That was the crazy matchup that Sinner did win in 3. Point is, though, if you actually take out the Indian Wells matchups, which Alcaraz undefeated in because he's the multiple-time champion, then Sinner is ahead in the head-to-head. So I do think that looking at the only clay meeting and Sinner winning maybe can instill some confidence in bettors to actually take Sinner to win the match at plus money. I think for the sake of this matchup, though, I'm more interested in the total. I like the over. I think these guys are going to kill each other, just simply put. You're looking at the head-to-head meetings, and 6 of the 9 head-to-head meetings did not end in straight sets. So I expect to see a very, very back-and-forth matchup. Alcaraz, we know, got here last year to the semis. Then he was in the middle of a marathon against Djokovic, and his body betrayed him, I think, in the early 3rd set. So I believe that's when that happened. I think it was early 3rd set. So point is, I do think Alcaraz might have that in the back of his mind for a little bit of motivation, that he was here before, and unfortunately, his body let him down against Djokovic in a match that looked like it was setting up for an all-timer. This time around, I do think Alcaraz will find a way to get it done personally, but do I want to take minus 162? Not really. I think this match is more up in the air. I think if you want to go for Alcaraz to win and each player to win a set, I think that might be a more appealing option, which is slowly turning into my favorite prop to actually bet. I just think that if you're looking at a 3 to 5 set match, and you're picking Sinner to win at least one of them, and you still think Alcaraz is going to win, then why would you not try to reduce the juice? I think 162 with these two and the head-to-head being at 5-4 in favor of Alcaraz just tells you how close this matchup should be. Maybe it goes to 5 sets. I do think, though, that clay is Sinner's worst surface, and you could argue that it's actually Alcaraz's best, maybe, which is kind of ironic because he already has won a U.S. Open title on hard court and a Wimbledon title on grass, but he has looked very good on clay. Both guys have looked very good so far in the event, as you're looking at Alcaraz and Sinner, and each of them have only dropped 1 set in the entire event. Alcaraz dropped 1 set to De Jong. You saw Sinner drop the first set to Moutet, but they have been dominant everywhere else, and I think you're going to end up seeing a very, very solid clash of titans here in the semis. If you want Alcaraz to win with both players winning a set, you can get that at plus 150 on Caesars. So you're basically saving like 90 cents if you just take Alcaraz to win with the over 3.5, basically, which I think is the approach. I'd rather go with the over at 37.5 games. I think even though it's juicy, I don't mind it. I think if it goes to 4, I don't expect many blowout sets here, maybe a 6-2 in there, but maybe a breaker as well. There have been a decent amount of breakers in the head-to-head. As I go through the actual meetings, the Indian Wells one was a little bit weird because Sinner kind of hurt his hand midway through that match, but that was an interesting scoreline where it was 1-6, 6-3, 6-2. The other matchups, Beijing had a tie-break, Miami had a tie-break, Indian Wells had a tie-break, US Open, that crazy match, had 2 tie-breaks and a 7-5. Umag had a tie-break, Wimbledon had a tie-break, and Paris had a tie-break. So before the Indian Wells matchup this year, if you actually count it up, that does mean that 7 straight head-to-head matchups had at least 1 tie-break, which is definitely good for the over. I don't mind that, but I think you're going to end up seeing a pretty competitive match that should, in theory, go either way. I'm going to lean to Alcaraz, so I would lean to Alcaraz to win and both players to win a set at plus 150. If Sinner wins, would I be shocked? Not really, but I just think Alcaraz is a little bit more solid on clay and a bit more consistent. Either way, though, moving on to the next matchup, which should be a fun one as well, a rematch of last year's semifinal, as you have Zverev taking on Ruud. Interestingly enough, Ruud did win that match last year in straight sets, and Zverev is now favored in the rematch at minus 125. You're looking at Ruud at plus 105. For the game spread, minus half a game for Zverev, plus half a game for Ruud. The over-under is once again in that 37.5 to 39.5 range. So shop around, try to find a number that you do like. But I do think looking at this overall spread, by the way, for the sets, the over 3.5 sets is minus 220. The under 3.5 sets is plus 175. Match to go to 5 sets is plus 200. Zverev minus 1.5 sets in this matchup is plus 165. You're looking at Ruud minus 1.5 sets in this matchup is plus 175. Going through the head-to-head, Ruud has done quite well recently in the matchups, as Zverev actually does lead the overall head-to-head. Currently 3-2. One of them, though, was a walkover, so technically 2-2 in the head-to-head. But Ruud did lose the first 2 meetings, then won the next 2, including the French Open semi that I mentioned from last year. They did face off in Miami in 2022 on hard court, and Ruud did win that one in 3. So I think that it's pretty interesting that Zverev had a marathon against Griekspoor, down double break in the 5th, came back and won. Then had a marathon against Rune, was down 2-1 in that one, came back and won. And then he ended up beating de Minaur, who I know it hurts us because we had him to win the quarter at 24-1, and de Minaur was just outmatched. Match was competitive, though. Just at the end of the day, Zverev was a bit more solid than de Minaur, and of course his serve definitely helped out because he got more free points. De Minaur's first serve percentage is also not very good, which I thought was definitely a talking point throughout the course of that matchup. But it just seemed like Zverev was a bit too solid for de Minaur, and I do not think the same is going to happen here against Ruud, because Ruud, we know, is a top-tier clay player in the world. Zverev is definitely better than de Minaur on clay. He's not better than Ruud on clay. Until Zverev actually makes a French Open final, Ruud's made back-to-back finals, and he lost to Djokovic and Nadal. I know that he got buried in those 2, but he's against 2 of the top 2 players of all time. So I'm going to give him a bit of a pass there. Nadal was injured. I'm aware of that. And then Ruud lost to like 9 straight games or something embarrassing over the course of that matchup. And then Nadal was seen on crutches right after it. But the point is, Ruud now actually has a good opportunity to win a Grand Slam title on clay. And I do think that he's the better clay player than Zverev. I find these money line odds fascinating. I don't know why Zverev's favored. I know that you're looking at Ruud, who was a bit fortunate that Djokovic was injured because he got a free walkover into the semis. Isn't that an advantage? Because you're more rested? I know you could argue the rest versus rust argument, but Ruud had extra days to rest and potentially prepare for this matchup. He had been dropping sets, though. Dropped a set to Fritz. Fritz is a fringe top 10 player. Dropped a set to Echeverry. Dropped 2 sets to Fokina, who Fokina's given Ruud some problems in the past. Ruud always wins, but the matches are close. And you're looking at Zverev, though. He's also had a couple of scares. So I think that both guys, you could argue, are pretty even, but I think Ruud should be favored until I see Zverev get over the hump and to actually make a Grand Slam final in on clay, I mean. I'm not going to pick him to win this match. I think Zverev, historically speaking, is a bigger choker than Ruud is. Now, maybe Zverev's improved on that. We'll see. But I do have my doubts. We saw in the Australian Open this past year, for example, that he was up 2-0 against Medvedev after beating Alcaraz in the previous round, and then he blew it. So if the match gets close and if it gets very, very cagey, I have more faith in Ruud to keep his composure than Zverev. So I think that's going to matter. Give me the dog here at plus 105. I think the wrong person's favored. I think it's going to be close, though, so I'm not going to automatically tell you Ruud's going to smack him in straight sets like he did last year. But the idea that a guy's made the Grand Slam final here in back-to-back years, he beat this exact same opponent in straight sets last year, and he's a dog against a guy that's never made a clay Grand Slam final. I find that fascinating. So I'm going to go with Ruud in this one, and the odds are off, and I think that the odds should actually be flipped. I would have Ruud at like minus 125, and I would have Zverev at plus 105. So I think that the wrong person is favored, simply put. So give me Ruud in that one. I don't mind the over as well. I see a marathon. The only concern that I have with the actual games is that unlike the Alcaraz and Sinner match, I can see a lopsided set or two. I could see a 6-1 in theory. It wouldn't totally shock me. So that definitely is a possibility. If you want to go through Ruud's last couple of matches, for example, Ruud has had at least one 6-2 set or lower in each of the last two matches. So there is a chance you might get a one lopsided set. Then again, it might go 5. I don't mind the over 3.5 sets in a parlay. I don't mind Ruud to win and both players to win a set of plus 180. I like that value quite a bit. Point is, though, I am going to go with Ruud to once again make a Grand Slam final. Will he win? I don't know, but it's a good spot for him, and we'll see what happens. So that's going to be my thoughts on that matchup. I also forgot, by the way, that we have to recap the quarters and our outrights for the actual event. For the outrights on the men's side, I told you that the women's quarters struck out in the quarterfinals. We had one person in all 4 quarterfinal matchups on the women's side, and all 4 lost, which absolutely sucks. However, for the men's tournament, we did very well. We got 3 out of the 4 right. The only thing we got wrong was Zverev. I thought Zverev was going to win the quarter after he beat Nadal in the first round. I couldn't take Zverev for the number, though, because he was facing off against Nadal in the first round, and I thought his price was too cheap because of it. So as a result, I ended up skipping Zverev. But we had Dimmenauer in that one. If you wanted to hedge, you could have hedged, and you could have made a lot of money because we got Dimmenauer at like 24-1, and Zverev was around like minus 250. So you could have made a bunch of units. You could have made like 9-10 units if you actually just hedged the thing. So if you did, congrats on making extra profit. But for the other quarterfinals, we had Ruud as our only pick in the first quarter. That was a winner at plus 260. Got there via walkover. Second quarter, we had Rune at 9-1, Khachanov at 18-1, and Dimmenauer 24-1. This one hurt a lot, but it is what it is. You could have hedged if you wanted to. Third quarter, though, we went chalk. We had Alcaraz by himself at minus 130. Fourth quarter, we went chalk, had Sinner by himself at minus 140. Actually, no, we had Sinner at minus 140 and Hurkacz at 11-1. So, point is, we did win 3 out of the 4 quarters, including Ruud at plus 260. Not too shabby. For the actual outrights to win the event, we have Alcaraz at 275, we have Sinner at 450, and we have Ruud at 12-1, which means if Zverev does win, we riot. But if he does not win, we automatically win. So we got a good chance at it, 75% if you ignore the betting odds and everything like that. Point is, the odds of us actually winning the outright for the French Open is very, very high. And hopefully one of those 3 guys comes through. If Zverev does win, if Zverev pulls it off, I'm going to be pissed, full disclosure. But either way, point is that's going to do it for the actual recap of the quarters and the preview of the men's semifinal matchups for Friday. Now it's time to get into the actual lock and dog picks for the matches. But before we get into that, do want to remind you once again that we're brought to you by Rhythm because it is officially time for the NBA Finals. The NBA Finals start on Thursday, and if you're betting on player props, then you need to download Rhythm because Rhythm gives you a menu of the best player props for every single NBA playoff game. Make it easy to go through it to find the best props to put your money on in seconds. Rhythm's predictions are backed by over 3 years of data and a team of data scientists and quants that focus on fine-tuning the algorithm to give you the best chance at winning. They also pair player prop graphs so you with their predictions so you can feel more confident whether it involves your actual bets or your DFS picks. They have everything from superstars to bench players. They have the best player prop lines, all backed by AI data. You don't have to constantly scroll through sports books. They also allow you to create your own models. So if you want to get AI-backed money line, spread, and total picks for every playoff game, now you can do so. Claim your 7-day free trial by going to sportscampodcast.com/rhythm, sportscampodcast.com/rhythm. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the semifinal matchups on the men's side for Friday. Now it's time for the actual lock and dog picks. For the lock and dog, I think I actually am going to double down on one particular play, so hopefully it works out for us. For the lock, I'm going to go with a parlay. It's actually plus money. I'm going to go with the overs. I'm going to go with Alcaraz Sinner over 3.5 sets parlayed with Ruud Zverev over 3.5 sets, and that comes out to plus 111. At the end of the day, I see two very competitive matches that should definitely not end in straight sets. Now, you're looking at the head-to-head, and 6 of the 9 head-to-head meetings between Alcaraz and Sinner did not end in straight sets. So I think you're looking at what should be a marathon. They faced off once this year. That went to 3 sets in Indian Wells, but I think you're going to end up seeing at least 4 sets in this matchup. Also, one career head-to-head clay meeting faced off in Umag back in 2022, and Sinner did win that one in 3. It is dated, I'm aware, but the point is the one clay matchup did not end in straight sets. I see that happening again. Now, as for Ruud's matchup, Ruud, I said before, has been dropping sets left and right. He has lost at least one set. All right, I'll put it this way. Ruud has not had a match end in straight sets in 7 of the last 9 matches. So the point is Ruud is constantly involved in marathons, and I think this is going to be another one. As for Zverev, 2 of his last 3 matches have gone to 5 sets, and Dimmenauer did have a set point in the second set, and he led 4-0 in the breaker. So Zverev could have easily have dropped that set too. So the point is Zverev has been solid, but a bit vulnerable at times, and I do think that Ruud can capitalize on that. So with that being the case, give me what should be 2 competitive matchups that go to at least 4 sets. Give me the over 3.5 set parlay with the 2 semifinal matchups taking place on Friday, and that's going to pay out at plus 111. For the dog, though, my double down play will be the Ruud and Zverev over 3.5 sets, and the odds reflect that at minus 125. They expect a coin flip. I see the same thing. As for this play, though, I am going to fade Zverev. I just think these odds are too off to me. Give me Ruud to win and both players to win a set at plus 180 on Caesars. I think that this has a lot of value to it. We saw Ruud win the last 2 head-to-head meetings, including the French Open semifinal meeting from last year. Yes, it wasn't straight sets. Point is, though, I think Zverev looks better. I think Ruud has been willing to drop sets, and I do think you're looking at what should be at least a 4 or 5 set match. So give me what I think should be another up and down match for Ruud, which I think he finds a way to win, but definitely should be full of drama, and that's good enough for me. Ruud also made the French Open final each of the last 2 years, so he has thrived in the semifinal matchups, whereas Zverev is over in French Open semis. So I do think until Zverev gets over the hump, I'm not going to pick him to, but I do think he can win at least 1 set, maybe 2, but I do think Ruud will eventually keep his nerve a bit better than Zverev, and I think he's going to win this match because of it. But plus 180 for a guy that won this exact same medium, this exact same court last year in straight sets, I think it's an insane value play, so I am going to go with it. So once again, the picks for the men's semifinal matchups in the French Open on Friday. The lock's going to be on a 2-pick parlay. Give me Alcaraz and Sinner over 3.5 sets, parlayed with Ruud and Zverev over 3.5 sets at plus 111. For the dog, give me Ruud to win and both players to win a set at plus 180. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. A reminder back once again on Friday for the women's final preview, as we have Swiatek taking on Paolini. So we're going to preview that matchup. We're going to, of course, cover the men's final on Saturday for Sunday. Either way, though, until next time, you can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the MLB show. Find me on the WNBA show as well. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.